Let me bring in Dr. Jaijit Bhattacharya. Do you think petrol and diesel price cuts could be on the cards, given the government's track record, given what you've seen over the last 9 years?
The point is that if you look at the highest tax bracket for those who are getting taxed directly, it's over 42%. That's extremely high. Now, we do understand the challenges of the government. I mean, last year, they were looking at a revenue of 22 lakh crores against an expenditure of roughly 40 lakh crores. So that's a 16 lakh crores of a hole that the government needs to fill up. And you cannot continuously have the fiscal deficit going up and breaching what was supposed to be part of the fiscal responsibility limits that were put into place. So obviously, as you started off by saying, it's a very tightrope that one has to play from the government side. But leaving that, the tightrope part of it, because that's a government job, your question being, what is it that people really want? And we should not ignore those who are paying the direct tax, even if it's 3 to 4% of the population. Do keep in mind that about 20% of the population is impacted by those who are paying taxes, because there's a family of 4 to 5 around those who are paying taxes. So it is still a significant population. And so politically also, one should not be ignoring this population. Now, do keep in mind that taxation is creeping in various ways, not just direct taxes. For example, when the regulation on the automobiles got changed, and suddenly the government said that, backed by the courts, that your car, if it's more than 10 years old, if it's diesel, will be taken away. If it's petrol, it will be taken away in 15 years' time in the NCR area. Now, if you're somebody who has already retired and wanted to live the rest of your lives with the car that you had, now where do you find extra income for to buy that car? In a way, it's a taxation. Even those who have not retired and they were willing to use their car for more than 15, 20 years, where will they find that money from? It's a taxation that's coming in essentially. So there seems to be a significant amount of burden that's coming on the middle class. And given all the other issues that you mentioned about job loss happening, global recession coming in, which will also lead to further price rise happening, because we don't see any abatement in the global conflicts. We still see the Russia-Ukraine war merrily going on. We see other conflicts that seem to be on the horizon. So we will be facing a significant global challenge, which means that price rise will continue to happen. And that is also coming from the fact that governments globally pumped in significant amount of money to help us out from the pandemic. Now, if you look at the US government, the inflation comes in when you start printing money, essentially, at the end of the day. So they pumped in money into their economy, then they printed money. And once they print money, that inflation gets exported to the rest of the world. So even though we have played a very prudent way of handling the pandemic, we're still getting hit by the policies of what US government is doing. In addition, I think I'll completely amplify what Professor was talking about in terms of job creation. So it's not just the ability to pay taxes, it's also the ability to earn so that I can pay the taxes. Now, having said that, this government has done an unprecedented amount of investments into capital, investments into infrastructure. The pace at which we have seen infrastructure happen in the last 5 to 6 years is completely unprecedented. So clearly, that has led to more jobs getting created, more demand getting created. To put an example, the cement consumption in the Delhi to Mumbai expressway that is getting constructed will be 1% of the total cement requirement of this country, that the total cement capacity in this country. So clearly, there will be job getting created once these capital infrastructure is scaled up, and so there will be enhanced ability to pay. But having said that, it's still a huge pinch for the middle class, where they end up facing the brunt of all the taxes that keep going up. If you look at some of the sin taxes, quote unquote, 28% GST on automobiles, 28% GST on the card for gaming. So if somebody wants to play an online game, there is a 28% tax on it. Clearly, these are significant irritants for the middle class, and we hope the government focuses on these irritants and rationalizes, because these are very, very high taxes. Now, if somebody is earning, is a small business person, that person pays 18% indirect tax, then pays about 33% direct tax. It adds up to roughly 50% of that person's income. Now, that's
So
why.
what are you expecting is going to happen in this budget, given that it's a pre-election budget? Also, although Professor Santosh doesn't seem to think so, he says that they will come with a full-fledged budget like they did in 2019, to next year too, with the thing that the next government will implement this budget. But that again speaks to the overconfidence, perhaps, of this government, that they know that they will be coming back. But what do you envisage is going to be the highlights in this budget, from what you've heard so far, from what your assessment has been so far?
So what I believe is that there'll be a tweaking that will happen for the lower tax brackets. I think there will be simplification of the tax codes, and I think that's important. There will be further simplification that I foresee based on the conversation that I've had. And I think those are two key things that I foresee. However, I don't see much of a change that will happen at the higher tax brackets. And we might even see some additional cess coming in, because clearly the government does need more money in the coming financial year for rolling out all the large infrastructure such as BharatNet and so on and so forth, which will be extremely capital intensive, and so the government does need money. So I believe the higher tax brackets will probably get taxed more, and you'll have some tweaking wherein the 2.5 lakh exemption limit will probably be increased to 5 lakhs. I think those are the small tweaks that I believe will happen from a direct tax
Abhishek,
perspective.
can I bring in Dr. Jaijit at this point? So you heard what Anupam had to say. How do you see this job creations, unemployment, a big sore point with the youth in this country as of now? COVID has not done us any wonders. The IT layoffs that we are seeing over the last several, that's added to the entire noise about unemployment reaching a crisis level. And Anupam is just explaining what the youth of today are actually going through as far as job opportunities, job creation, unemployment is concerned, because that's a big sore point. Now, what would you envisage the government should be doing to turn things around as far as job creation is concerned?
I think the first issue is the data itself, and obviously there's been a large amount of discussion on the data, and I am sure the data that Anupam had presented is obviously well thought out and well looked into. I had personally done a deep dive into the status of employment in this country, and I would like to differentiate between jobs and employment in the sense that are there enough income creating facilities out there? One of the most abused words is gig economy. But the fact of the matter also is that there is a large amount of jobs that got created because of gig. To take an example, between 2007 and 2017, the number of drivers in this country doubled, and they're all gig workers. And if you look at the jobs created in hard numbers, in absolute numbers, in 2017 there were 700,000 more Ola Uber drivers that were created. Similarly, there are delivery boys as the last mile of e-commerce that have come into place. Um, uh, and and therefore, when we look at the data, we're not really sure what is that we're looking at. When one goes to a household and asks that, do you have a job? The answer comes out to be no, because a gig job is not looked at as a job, because a job is where you get an employment letter, you get a monthly salary, and these are things that are not happening. So, how deep is the issue is a question mark, I would say. If it was as severe as is being made out to be, I would see a lot of riots. Now, the Agniveer riots were not really because of jobs in that sense, and it died out very quickly. And as the reports came out subsequently, it seemed to be riots that were orchestrated by those who were training the youth into getting into the military. So I would put a lot of question mark into the conversation going on, because this has been something that we have been hearing since 2014, 2015. And that's the time, 2016, 17, when we did a deep dive into this issue. And we're not entirely convinced that there is a large gap that is there in terms of employment, or in terms of in terms of income generation. Of course, there has been inflation. Of course, the quality of jobs has also changed. But we also need to keep in mind that some of the jobs that we were calling as jobs were underemployment earlier. So when there is underemployment, Professor Mehrotra, I'm sure the moderator will come to you, but it's a little distracting to have a raised finger. I'm sure she will come to you, and I'm sure you'll have lots of important and pertinent points. I'll just complete my point, and then I'm sure she'll come to you. Now, when we look at the underemployment that existed, people were switching from that underemployment to whatever next better job they were getting. So, if we say that the gig work is not good, then why are people switching from whatever they had into gig work? So, clearly, the gig work is paying them more than what they had earlier, and that's been the attraction. And I think those are some of the quick points I would like to make. In terms of what the government needs to do, is to continue on the path that they were doing, which is make sure that there is more capital investment happening in infrastructure, that there is more investment attracted, double down on the PLI scheme. PLI obviously is targeted towards technology-driven industries because the whole production-linked incentive is to make sure that more and more is produced in India. The reason why we are not able to produce more in India is because we don't have the technology. When there is more technology, obviously the labor component of that industry will be low. But then there are very few industries where there are high labor components. The labor component related industries are not dependent on PLI. If there are other incentives that need to be given for the labor driven industries, then that's something that should be given and is most welcome and should be given. The PLI is for a different purpose. It's to make sure that technology is adopted into India and technology moves into India, and that's where PLI comes in. And I think the government must double down on that so that there is more efficiency. The center of gravity of the economy in the world moves towards India, which will automatically lead to the next set of industry, which is essentially the network industry, which is the transportation part of it, the warehousing part of it, which is where labor starts coming in. Now, if I don't produce, then what will the labor do? But once they start producing, even if it's a high technology, low labor industry, the goods are then shipped out through labor. And that's where 25% of any economy is, which is the network economy. And that's where the labor will start coming in. So I would, basically say accelerate every single policy that the government is doing. And I think that's in the right direction.